Because yeah, you can get that car or the house. Is that really what you want, or is that what you think you need to have to look successful? And they come to me, it's more of like they're burned out in their role. They don't like what they do. They're underpaid in some of their roles for sure. People who don't get invited to interviews is because your experience does not match our job description. You're not what we're looking for. How can you create these opportunities for yourself? If no one can guarantee you a job, what are some things you can do right now during undergrad? How can you start building community with people in those careers right now? Doesn't mean they're going to guarantee you a job, but like, are you going to be able to learn with them, connect with them? Specifically female lawyers, it's so hard to have a family and be a lawyer.
I am excited to have JoJo Mendoza with me. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This is going to be a great episode about career development, life coaching, and things that a lot of people are going through with the whole way the tech sector is, and how, we go to college thinking one thing and then we realize later on that it's actually not the vibe that we want to go with. But JoJo, please introduce yourself and give me a little spiel about what you do.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Jovana Mendoza, and I go by JoJo. I'm a life and career coach, specifically helping first-gen women of color navigate their career post-grad so they can pursue a career that they truly, truly love. I truly believe you can find a career that's for you and that you really enjoy waking up to every day. And that's like the mission of mine. Like, I really want to help others really identify their passion, their purpose, and how they can put that in this world. So yeah.
Now that's very specific, and it takes a lot of your own personal time to actually do this. So why do this? Why not just go be someone to make $200,000 a year at a bank or work in tech? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, so I think for me to be able to answer that question, I think it's really important for me to share my story and how my story led me to where I'm at today. So I first wanted to be a high school teacher. Well, let's just say a teacher. I didn't really know what subject or what age group, but I was 5 years old when I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I think looking back at being 5, I loved how my teacher was very loving, very friendly. So I was like, I want to do that. So I always grew up thinking I was going to be a teacher. Middle school and high school, though, and I think you and I talked a little bit about how our life influences us.
Yeah.
And, people are like, oh, like, can I change things? But for me, so a little bit about me, my parents did separate when I was in middle school. They got divorced. That was really hard on me. I was having a hard time at the home. Just navigating that transition, that change in my life, was really difficult. And I remember in high school, my teachers were really there for me. I joined volleyball. I joined cheerleading in high school so I could stay away from life. But that was my exit. I was young. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, how can I stay away from the house? I don't want to be home. Too much is going on emotionally. I don't know how to deal with this as a teen. So my teachers, my coaches were very supportive. And again, at that age, I was like, I want to do that for someone else. I want to be there for someone else when they're navigating middle school, high school, and they're just having a hard time. Through that experience, I was like, okay, I want to be a teacher. I didn't know a subject. And like I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm a first-gen Latina. Both of my parents are from Guanajuato, Mexico. So I was the first one in my family to apply to college and leave the home at 18. So it was very exciting, but nerve-wracking. But for me, I was like, this is my chance for me to create the life I want. At 18, I didn't know what that life was, but
no one does at 18. We think we do, or we're supposed to know, and yeah, no one does.
Yeah, so I remember just being like, okay, I'm gonna be a teacher. I need to go to college, so I can create that. During that time in high school, there's this A through G requirement you need to have complete to be able to go to a 4-year right after. I wasn't really quite there yet. My sophomore year, so I remember my counselor was like, okay, this is what you need to do if you want to go to college right after. So I was like, well, I need to do that. And again, I feel like just living at the home with my parents separating and I just wanted to create my life. That's just how I saw college, as an exit ticket. I had no idea how I was going to get there, but I knew my teachers were the ones helping me apply and get the information that I needed. So I applied to San Jose State. I applied to 4 campuses, but I ended up going to San Jose State University. That's what led me to San Jose. I was born and raised in Salinas, California. So an hour away, not too far, but I was like, yes, I get to leave. I get to create the life I want. This is a new beginning. So I went to San Jose State. I started as a child development major, changed my major after a year because I realized I wanted to teach high school students. So I changed my major to social science teacher preparation with a minor in Chicano studies. And that's when I realized, okay, I want to teach high school, specifically history. I learned and realized high school, right? Everyone would be like, are you sure you want to teach?
I mean, I was thinking about, you ever see the movie Dangerous Minds?
No, I haven't.
Oh my,
No.
that Michelle Pfeiffer movie. I mean, I'm getting old. It was the L.A. high school, and someone wants to be a teacher. Like, wow, that's you want to jump into that? Wow, go on.
Yeah. No, yeah. And like, honestly, and I want to share this because a lot of people would be like, are you sure you want to go into teaching? When I was in high school and college, mostly college, especially when you see your peers doing other degrees, other careers, the careers that are known to make you money, like engineering, like lawyers, things like that. And I remember when I would share I wanted to be a teacher, some people would be like, are you sure you want to do that? You want to work with high schoolers? Like, their attitude, like they would just say things and they're like, you're not gonna make money. That was a one what
Oh yeah, yeah. Teachers don't make any money.
yeah,
Hear
and
that too much.
yeah, and I would hear that too much and I was like, okay. And you know, you're 18, 19, trying to figure out your career, and then you're hearing all these things, and I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like, am I not gonna make like a living? Like, what does that mean? Like, and then I've learned like there's so many factors, like what kind of lifestyle do you want? Do you want a family? What area of living do you want to live in? So I've learned like the difference of like what I was thinking at that time to now, but I remember I would hear that a lot. And I remember I just tell myself, like, I truly want to pursue a career that I wake up to and it doesn't feel like a job. And at that time, it was a teacher. Like that's what I thought would be. Of course, I never taught in a classroom, so I wasn't
Yeah.
taught in the class. Every teacher I would shadow or talk to, like, hey, what do you like about teaching? What's challenging? Like do informational interviews with, they would, you know, answer my questions, but they're like, Jovana, you're gonna know once you're a teacher. Like once you're in the classroom running your class, you're gonna know. And that's gonna be the best experience for you. And I was like, okay. So through undergrad at San Jose State, I was pursuing my major to be a teacher. During that time though, I didn't want to wait until I graduated college to help students. I didn't want to wait. So I'm like, okay, how can I help students now? So my sophomore year at San Jose State, I was an EOP student, so that's an educational opportunity program for first gen college students navigating higher ed. So
Right.
I was part of that program as a student, and they had positions for students to help their students. So I applied to be an academic coach during that time. And that's when I would be supporting college students, specifically first gen, navigate college. These students that were assigned to me were specifically struggling academically. So their GPA were between a 2.0 to a 2.199. And my role was to really find out what's going on. How can I support them? What resources do I need to connect them? And how can we create a plan for them to pursue their degree, to get the grades that they need to finish and persist? I loved it. I remember doing that role all through undergrad. And I took other roles during undergrad. I was a new student mentor. I was a summer bridge advisor. So in these roles, the role was to help our students transition to the university, acclimate, connect them to resources, help them figure out their major, how it connects to a career. And I was like, wow, I love this. So actually my junior year of college, I already had doubts and thoughts of like, I don't know if I want to be a teacher anymore. But as a first gen, I thought it was just imposter syndrome kicking in. I thought maybe I'm doubting myself, or like I'm so close to the goal I've always wanted since I was 5. So I'm like, maybe I'm just getting scared. I'm very close to be an actual teacher. So I was like, you know what? No, it's okay. I'll just pursue teaching. But a question I asked myself during that time also was, if I don't go move forward with teaching, will I regret it? And the answer was yes. I wasn't going to know how teaching would have been. I could ask my friends, oh, how's your teaching experience? But everyone's going to have their own experience in their field. So I decided to pursue grad school right after. I went to University of San Francisco. So I did apply for my master's in teaching with a single subject teaching credential. That was a 2-year program. And I started that program in fall 2019. So I did finish that program during the pandemic and all of that. And during that time, that's when you go into a program for teaching, you do a student teaching placement. So that's when you're teaching in the classroom and, getting your hours to get your credential and all of that stuff. That's when I knew. I was like, okay. I I was like, okay, I'm in the program. This is what I have to do type of thing. But during that time as well that I started grad school, I started a full-time position as an academic advisor at San Jose State. So I was like, okay, I get to do this. I love working with college students. I did it during undergrad. Like I'm doing it more in academic setting, like with policies and major change and all of those things. But I'm like, I love the college setting. I love helping them figure out their life at 18, 19. So while I was in grad school, I remember working full time as an academic advisor and then going to class once a week. And then my last year, I was teaching in the mornings from like 8 to 12, and then I would advise in the afternoon. And I remember it was 6 months in, I would say 4 months in, I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do. And then I was like, okay, JoJo, like, is it imposter syndrome? Are you doubting? You know, it's something new. It's okay to not have it all figured out in the classroom. Or is this really not what you want to do as a career? And I was, I feel like, I think as a first gen, I didn't know who to really turn to. I feel there's support. And I think this kind of ties back to like why life and career coaching now and why I created this. I was the first one in my friend group to go to grad school right after undergrad. I was the first one in my group navigating that and like changing their mind in their career. So I didn't know who to really turn to. I'm like, we're all trying to figure it out here. Like, who do I turn to? And during college, there's support services, there's programs that help students. Well, once you graduate and you're a professional, you're in the world, like you kind of have to figure it out on your own, or,
Yeah.
or unless you have mentors, or unless you have someone in your family that's done what you've done, want to do, or can support you in that area. So that's when I realized like, I don't want to teach. And then I remember I still had a semester left of grad school. And I was like, well, I'm going to finish my program. I'm not going to not finish. So I told myself, what's the best thing I can do for myself as an individual? Like, I have to finish. I'm not going to walk away from this. So I think asking myself the questions, navigating that and asking myself questions like what's in my control and what's not in my control. My control is, okay, JoJo, like, what do you want to do right now? And I told myself, you have to finish this program. How about you get the spring semester, teach, be the best teacher you can be, and learn from that, and be the best advisor you can be and learn from that, and pay attention to what do you like about each role, what do you not like, and what do you want to continue learning and growing, and that is going to help you figure out what step to take. Within 2 months in spring, I was like, okay, I'm going to finish teaching. I love it. I can do it. I know I can do it. Like I got the training for it. I know what to do to teach a student. Like I know what I had to do, but during that time I learned I love working with students. I love the relationship building, the connectingness. I remember my high school students would come to me and I would always like go advisor mode on them instead of teacher mode. I caught myself doing that. And when I had to teach content, I love like ethnic studies and Chicano studies and all of that. So when I was doing lesson plans, I remember enjoying it because I I enjoy it, but they're like, okay, this is just a class, right? So I noticed, I'm like, okay, I love history for me, but I love being with students and having these connections and interactions and talking about like life goals, career goals, support. Like if you're having, I remember having some students who were having a hard time at home and I was like, oh, what support do you think you need? Like having those conversations felt a lot more fulfilling than teaching the Civil War or like World War II. Like I would teach that and I would try to bring people of color in the history, women in history, because women played a huge role during World War II. So I would try to do that. And my students were like, well, this is cool. Like I didn't know about this. But I realized I'm like, okay, like I love the helping instead of teaching. So I finished my program, but I would say March 2021. I graduated grad school May 2021.
Okay.
I think it was February, March when I decided I don't want to teach. And I was like, okay, JoJo, what are you going to do? I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay in my current role as a higher ed academic advisor. I love it. And this is the thing I want to highlight too. I remember thinking everyone in my cohort was applying to teaching roles, or some of them were already teachers. Like mostly all of them were teachers except myself and this other student. And when they were like, oh, are you going to start applying? My gut was like, no. And my body was sending me signals already. Like everyone was applying. And I feel in this situation, I could have been like, oh my God, everyone's applying. Let me apply too. Like I have to like kind of like fit in, you know, like I have to do what they're doing. Like we're all teachers here. We're all aspiring teachers. But I was like, no, this is not what I want anymore. And that's okay. And it was hard to get there, but I feel like I had already been thinking about this for a few months. And I remember I went to my advisor and I told her, because of course they want to support us with applying to teaching roles and all of that. But before I graduated, I remember telling her, like, hey, this is my plan. I don't think I want to move forward with teaching for the next year or two. I'm like, I don't know, maybe later. At that time, I was like, I think I just need a break from this. Um, and I told her I'm going to stay in my higher ed role as an advisor. I love what I do. And she's like, yeah, we support you. Let us know if there's anything we can do. And I remember making that decision felt so right for me. Felt so right. And I think going inward and going to what I wanted, because at this point, I hadn't told my mom, I hadn't told my family, I hadn't told anyone, like, hey, I'm not going to teach, but I'm going to be done with grad school in a month. I remember when I shared with my mom, she was actually very supportive. She did ask, hey, your degrees are in teaching. Like, are you going to be good? And I was like, yeah. And
Gonna be good.
are you going to be good? And I think sometimes people feel like their degree equals their career path, and that's not always the case. That's not the case. I know a lot of people who got specific degrees in psychology or business or a specific career, and they're not in that field at all. And they're like, oh, I just really liked it, or I really enjoy it for myself, for my interests or things like that. And they're like, but I learned that through experience. And I think that's so important to highlight. I feel we're expected to pick a career and be so successful at it and be like, yes, this is the career for me. And that might be the case sometimes. You might get lucky and your first career is the one, or you might have to go through 5 careers to figure that out. And I think normalizing that is so important because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's life is different. Some people are young parents. Some people are later parents, or like some people decide to move abroad. Like there's so many life paths that you can take. And it's so important to like eliminate the timeline of like, you should be married by 30 or have kids by this age, or like all these things. Like, how about you decide what you want that to look like? And you can always think about it yearly if you feel like, oh, I don't want to like not have a goal in mind. It could be like, oh, just have check-ins with yourself. Like, does this life that I'm living right now feel good to me? And if not, okay, where can I get support? So during that time too, that's when I realized, okay, no teaching. I'll stay as an advisor. And that's when I was like, how can I help people figure out their career path like I did? How can I help them navigate these challenges times when you're stuck, when you're not knowing what to do or like who to turn to? And then I was like, that's when the life and career coaching thought came to mind. At that point, I had no idea what to do. I had no idea how to start. But I did have someone on Instagram that I knew from college. She was a coach. She was coaching people who wanted to help people and be coaches. And I was like, okay, I think that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be a coach, but I don't know how or how to get started. So she really helped me really figure out like this coaching industry and like what this coaching industry even was. I actually had a personal trainer before. So there's coaches in the training industry and all of that. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's kind of like the same, but you coach people based on your skill set and what they want support in. So I did that program. I finished grad school, and the week after I started that coaching program that was like 3 months. But I feel like it felt right to me because I was following a purpose and a passion that aligned with what I wanted. I shared with my friends, with I think the hardest part was sharing it with my mentors and my professors that supported me get through undergrad and grad school, and then tell them like, hey, I'm actually not going to teach anymore. They were very supportive though, but I think that was the hardest part, like just feeling that like guilt of like, wow, I got all this support and I'm not doing that. But at the end of the day, like they were super happy for me because I was following my passion, my purpose, and what I wanted. And that's where I learned like your career path might change, your career goals might grow or change or pivot completely, and that's okay. I think you normalizing it is gonna help you navigate when thoughts and doubts and comments from other people come up. So that's kind of like what led me to being in my career in higher ed as a life and career coach. And just I love my job. Like I really don't wake up to like, oh, I have to go to work on Monday, or like I can't wait for the weekend. Like, yeah, I have a life too outside of my career, and that's, I do dance, I do hip hop, I go to the gym. I do hobbies and things that help me like fuel my cup, but I also love the career I wake up to. I go to vacations because I love traveling, but I get to come back to a career that I love because I know what I want to do, how I want to help people, and how I want to show up. And that has really, really helped me. I know one of the things you brought up earlier was about like, why am I doing this work instead of a job that can pay me 200K a year, 300K a year? And I feel like for me, yes, money's important in this country to live and like survive and all of that. But for me, money's not everything. Like my current salary is enough for me to, and again, I'm single. I'm not with kids. I don't have kids. I do have a fur baby. So my son does get groomed every 8 weeks. So, I have my little son, but, my little fur baby. But I feel like where I'm in my life right now, this works and it's okay. And also the way I manage my money, the way I think about money has really helped me be okay with my current salary and with the career that I love.
What I will say is, I think you hold the record for the introduction that pretty much encompasses everything that you do in your career. So that is awesome. There's a lot to dissect there, and I was taking notes during the whole thing because it's a lot of good information. First of all, if you were enjoying that introduction, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with all your friends and family because this is going to be some good stuff. So let's start from what I can say is the beginning with this. Let's talk about your initial life thought process. You're 18, you think you want to go be a teacher, you want to go help people, but what's your mindset at that point? What are you envisioning for the future of your life? Do you think I'm just going to have a career and then I'm supposed to get married, or my parents tell me this is the way it's going to happen and then I'm just supposed to go with it? How you thought about life back then and where were you at?
Yeah, so taking myself back to 18, like I mentioned, my parents were divorced. My dad did start a new family with his new partner, and that was really hard for me to see that happen. It happened so quickly, and I feel like at that time, my father didn't have the communication skills or the resources to have a conversation with me and explain as his daughter, like, hey, like this is what's happening. Like it was just like boom, like surprises, like oh boom, there's a kid. Wait, what? Like there's a kid coming. Like I feel like my life just felt so out of control that I was like, okay, what decisions can I make right now? And for me was going to college. And the mindset I had at that time, at that age was, I don't have another option. I need to create a life. I need to provide for myself because the example my father left before he left was very unsure. My mom like had to borrow money from family members. So in that time I was like, I don't ever want to see myself in a position where I'm struggling because I depended on someone. At that age it was my father and he couldn't provide. So honestly, I was like, I have to go get a career, provide for myself because no one else will provide for me. And at that age, my father gave me the example of that. So yeah, that's kind of like the thought process. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So I was like, okay, I'll be a teacher. I'll be a teacher forever, I thought, and I'll be safe. I think I wanted safety and security that I didn't have in my late teens. And I saw it as like pursuing a career. Not that I loved, but it was just like providing for myself. A career is going to help me provide for myself, have that safety.
Wow. I mean, it's amazing how when you go back to when your father split and how it affected the way you thought long term. Like prior to that, when you're with mom and dad, and you have any siblings?
Yes, I'm the second oldest. Is four of us.
Four of us. Okay, so there's four of you, and it's sort of like, okay, this is how a family's supposed to look: husband and wife, four kids, and then you grow up, maybe you get married at a young age to start your own family and repeat the cycle, and then something like that happens, and it throws you for a loop where you're like, I need to go out there and take care of myself because if I have to depend on somebody else, and that person for whatever reason is no longer in my life, now it's on me. And seeing what your mom went through and how she had to borrow money and figure out how to raise four kids at the time, because you all were in your teens, correct?
Yeah, I was 10 when he left. My older sister was 14 and my little sister was 5 and my brother was 6. So we were all little.
Wow.
And she had to raise us as a single parent on her own because he completely like walked out.
Jesus.
Completely.
How have you seen family values change in your experience? Even now, just watching and seeing family and friends and cousins and coworkers, what are you seeing about the dynamics that maybe was or wasn't there in the past?
That's a good question. I feel like what have I seen like from people experiencing that?
Like
or
the
what-
old days where everybody would have kids in their 20s, early 20s, and they'd have big families, and the families would all get together and have picnics and barbecues, and it was just this big, family unit within the neighborhood. We don't see that as much anymore. And what do you think? Like, what do you think is driving that?
Based on my experience, I think definitely when my parents separated, I noticed the disconnect from connecting with families because everyone knew what had happened. So there was infidelity in the relationship with someone from the community. So it was the drama.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew who my dad ended up with and like how it happened and how we would all hang out as a family. So it was a little messy.
Wow.
It was very messy. So I feel like after that, obviously I was young, but I feel like my mom's mental health and just what she needed was probably to, keep some distance from specific people, maybe. But I feel like going through that experience, because I know one of your questions was like, oh, like, how did you see your life at 18? Like getting the degree, maybe getting married after having kids, all of that. I actually didn't even think that far. I was like, I just need to get out and provide for myself. That was the thing. And but during college, I did meet someone. I did date someone for like almost 5 years. And I remember while I was dating him, I was finishing undergrad and I started grad school. And then my brain started thinking like, okay, well, next you move in with him, like you maybe get married and maybe have kids. He did already have kids, so I felt like, okay, we had the conversation. I'm like, okay, is it okay if maybe I don't want kids? I was like, I don't think I want kids. He's like, yeah, I mean, I already have kids, but if you do decide to, like, let me know. I'm open to it. And I was like, okay, yeah, later, like when I'm 30, like let's talk about that later. But I feel like during that age, you do start thinking like, okay, like is the expectation to get married? Is it to have kids? Thankfully, I think my mom's experience, and I have asked her, I'm like, do you think if we were still married, you would expect us to have kids by this point? Would you expect us to be like married? And she's like, I don't know, because she's like, I feel like I can't really say because I'm not in that place anymore. But going through that experience, divorcing your dad and all of that, it like I always supported your dreams, whatever that is for you. If you do want a family, I'm gonna support. If you do want to pursue your career first, or if you're figuring it out, I'm gonna support. So she's always been very supportive. And I feel like you mentioned, like a lot of people, like a lot of families coming together and all of that. A lot of my friend groups are still single. They're traveling, they're pursuing their careers, they're focusing on what they want, they're working on their healing journey. That's something I've been working on too, because I've noticed how that has impacted me in my early 20s and how I make decisions with relationships and all of these things. So what I've been seeing right now is a lot of focus on healing, self growth, being selfish, honestly. And I think being selfish is a great thing, especially when you want to work on yourself to show up better for the people around you.
Well, we definitely have an advantage being in America, and it's not like any other country in the world. And
Correct.
you still have family in Mexico, right?
I have a few aunts in Mexico. They're older than my mom.
Got it.
But they were not like, I don't go visit like often.
Well, for most parts of the world, it's a different environment where it's just a struggle to survive. You need two people just to make ends meet. There is no retirement system. You have a house and then you raise kids. The kids take care of you. You help take care of your grandkids, and the cycle repeats itself. And that's how most people live around the world. And we have a great advantage here in this country that we don't have to worry about that. We have retirement systems. We have long-term planning. We have the ability to take care of ourselves better here when some other countries just don't have the means or the education to do that. And it allows us all this freedom where we can say, what's the best path for me? Is the best path for me to try and find a career that I can devote to and spend a lot of time with, meet new people, keep myself healthy, versus I need to live by expectations because that's how you survive in a certain environment.
Yeah.
And the good news is that it allows for our country to continue to be as successful as it is when you have all these people, both men and women out there making money, having careers, expanding the economy. It makes us probably well, definitely the best country in the world. We have our problems. Nobody doesn't. Everybody knows that.
No one's perfect.
Exactly. But it allows us to be the best country in the world. And the trade-off might be, from what I've seen, is your traditional family values get sacrificed for that because we're all kind of doing our own thing. And it's great for us individually. But then you start seeing no one's having kids anymore. Nobody's having the nuclear family anymore. When my grandmother died, she was 103 when she died. The family just, everybody split up. Everybody, now this sister doesn't talk to that sister anymore. And it's like she was really the glue that kept everybody together. And once she was gone, you can see everybody just scattered. And you can't really blame them because everybody has their own life. They live in different parts of the state or the country, and trying to just focus on, staying together because grandma's still here. It wasn't a need anymore. So in a way, they're able to open up. There was one person, I forgot who I was talking to. She'd been married for like 35, 40 years, and then her husband died, natural causes, whatever. The funny thing she said after the grieving process was, well, now this is where my life begins because I had only been married. I had only known that. Now I can go do this. Now I can try a career. Now I can see what the rest of the world is. It's funny how the mindset for some people might be is like, oh, now I can do all this. And I see a lot of our a generation, millennials and Gen Z now, being able to take advantage of that and say, you know what, let's go focus on the career. Let's go see what I want to do. Let's go travel and do things that our parents couldn't do. My parents could never travel to Canada, Mexico, Japan. It wasn't a thing. It was just stay at home and take care of the kids. So in a way, they've allowed us to live a better life than they did. And they kind of tell us, I just want you to live the best life that you can. If you live it better than me, I'm totally happy. And we're seeing that drive a lot of behaviors now. And it's funny because tying it back to what you do for a living now, people may go to college thinking that I'm supposed to go do this because it makes good money. I should be a lawyer because lawyers make good money and people respect them. And then you go into law school or med school and realize this is a lot of work. It's a lot of money. And then even if I graduate, there's no guarantee I'm going to get a job. And if I do get a job, it may have to be somewhere that I don't want to live. And now what I do, this isn't what I had been told. And then so we see a lot of people switching now and saying, what am I going to do that I'm really passionate about, that I have a focus on, that is going to make me have a purpose? I don't like using the word happy because happiness goes up and down, but you have a purpose.
Yeah.
More freer, exactly. And that may be something that doesn't have as many zeros in the paycheck, but it's something that you actually enjoy. And then if you find something that does drive your passion, and you learn to live within the means that that career can provide you financially, now you're at a position where you have a lot more freedom. I can live off of this salary here. It's not as much as Google, but I'm comfortable living over here, and I'm doing something that brings me more and more purpose, which improves my mental health, which improves my relationships with other people. But it just means I can't afford that bigger house. And if I can't afford that bigger house, maybe I can't afford a family. And if I try to squeeze all that into my life, now I'm bringing that stress in here where I financially can't afford it, which means I may have to go and do that job that I don't want to do because it pays the bills. It's funny how this loop goes. Do you have those type of conversations with your clients and see that mindset come out?
Yeah, I feel like we definitely, no, thank you for everything you shared. I think, first off, I think it's so important to talk about, like, the privilege that we do have in this country and like the access that we do. And like, especially like being citizens in this country, that's a whole other layer in conversation. Just, but yeah, tying to like the clients that come to me, I would say it connects to, I always like to talk to them about like, what do they value? Because yeah, you can get that car or the house. Is that really what you want, or is that what you think you need to have to look successful? Maybe right now in your life you don't want that, and maybe in the future you do because you want to have a family, and that's great. So I think like when they come to me, it's more of like they're burned out in their role. They don't like what they do. They're underpaid in some of the roles for sure.
Well, first of all, do you have mostly women, or you have a mix of men and women?
I have women. Yeah, mostly of the people that reach out to me are women. They're first gen, women of color. They're usually the eldest or the second eldest. First one of their family navigating these careers type of thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And are you seeing a consistent trend going back to what we were talking about with where their mindset is, and this is why they want to change or change career paths?
I feel the mindset shift is of kind of like, well, this is what I was told to do, like go to college and get a job. Most of their careers are in education. I would say helping people, service, like social work, things like that. But they're kind of like, I have the job. Yeah, maybe from the outside in, it looks like, oh, wow, she has a job. She got her degree. Like, she's successful. But it's like, but I'm unhappy. My mental health, like you said, like, what if this job is like not supporting you and like you don't have the energy to go home and, do your hobbies or go to the gym or go to a dance class or do things that fill your cup because you're drained from a job that just takes everything from you. So that's kind of like the trend I've been seeing. And their concern is kind of like, what other options do I have? Like my degree was in this, my experience is just in this, like what else can I do? And I think that's when the transferable skills definitely kick in. But yeah, that's kind of like the pattern I've been noticing.
Gotcha. And so I'm guessing they're mostly in their 20s?
Mid to early 30s, kind of like, yeah, late
Gotcha.
20s, early 30s. There you go.
And how big is the idea of having a family in their mindset? And is that what some of the challenges are? Is that I want to go pursue that career, but that means that I have to put the work in and not make a lot of money. But I want to have a family and time's ticking. Like, what do I do? Do you see that dilemma?
I actually don't. I actually, with the current clients I have, I don't really see like, maybe one, I know she wants to have a family within the next year. It's been a conversation. She's also a close friend of mine. But like just looking at my friend group, looking at the clients I've worked with, like right now their priorities kind of like figuring out the career path they want to take and like exploring, really like figuring out what that looks like for them. But yeah, the conversation of like, oh, I want a career to make this much money or like this because I want to have a family soon doesn't come up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And even thinking longer term, do people think, well, if I pursue this career and I have to devote the next 10 years to building, let's say, a business, or I want to be CEO of Yahoo, something like that, that might mean that I'm pushing potentially having a family down the line so long that it may just become the odds are just not there anymore. And am I comfortable making that decision now? Because you'll hear stories of, the 55-year-old woman that followed her career and she did everything she was supposed to do, and now she can't have a family because she's past that point now, and she tries to help the younger women, saying, hey, if you want to have a family, you have to consider all this because you spend so much time in your career, and next thing you know, you're in your 50s, and biology works the way that it works. But do you see people saying that and saying, okay, I'm comfortable knowing that if that never happens, I'm okay because I followed what I wanted to do?
I feel like I haven't had someone say something specifically like that, but like I'm thinking of a friend right now. She's in her mid 20s, and I know she wanted to be a lawyer before. Like when she started college, she was like, I want to be a lawyer. But then after having informational interviews with your lawyers and connecting with specifically female lawyers, like it's so hard to have a family and be a lawyer. And she said that when she found that out, she's like, no, well, I do want a family in the future. So, and for her, the future at this moment, she's like mid 30s kind of thing. And I feel like I hear more of like, look, right now, I don't think I want to have kids. I've seen people going with the option of like freezing their eggs. Some people are like, I'm open to adoption. Like if that time does come and, because for example, for me in this moment of my life, when people do ask me, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I don't want kids. Like, and I share that. And of course, I get comments from different angles, of like, oh, that's, yes, like follow what you want. Or some people are like, are you sure, type of thing. And the way I respond to that is just more of like, if I do get to in the point of my life where I do change my mind, because I could, who knows? I don't have an issue adopting. Like, I feel like if I really want to be a mother, and again, like, what can I control? What options do I have in that moment of my life? Then I will go based on that. So that's kind of like the approach I take. And I think the way you see things, and I don't know, I just feel like when you want something, you make it happen,
Yeah.
regardless of your age.
I
That's how
will
I
tell
see
you,
it.
I will tell you that in today's world, and I'm learning this even just doing this whole experience, is some people have the drive to have a family, but really if they have the impact on maybe a kid's life who's not their own, let's say you're that aunt that really wants to raise her nephews and nieces. They're not yours. I mean, they're not your specific kid, but you're making an impact in their life and you're helping them become better members of society later on. So you end up fulfilling that sort of nurturing vibe in you. Just because they're not your own kids doesn't really matter. And I'm hearing more and more stories about that. People in their 30s, women especially in their 30s, that are, hey, I can do my own thing. I have my career. I can take care of my fitness, but my nieces and my nephews, they're my pride and joy, and I can love to raise them and help them grow up. And that happened with me. I had two aunts that didn't have their own kids, and they helped to raise me in ways that my mother couldn't do because she was working, or my father helped me from the man's side point of view, but they would help me with other things that my mother couldn't because she was just so busy. And that was their way of contributing. They're both in their 80s now and they're still kicking it, whatever. Never had kids, but that was their fulfillment with it. Or adoption, a bigger thing there is there's kids out there who are already alive that don't have parents for whatever reason. And if somebody can give them a second chance, like that's just almost more important. I relate in San Francisco, there's more dogs than there are kids, and everybody just accepts that now. One of my friends once wanted to get, I forgot what the type of dog was, but it was a specific dog he had to go to a breeder for.
Okay.
The breeder wanted like $2,500. I said, yeah, you could do that, but if you go to the shelter, there's a bunch of dogs who are already alive and they need homes. What's it going to cost you, $100? So like, do you want to take care of some that's already here, or do you want to spend the money and the time just to have the one that you specifically wanted? I mean, it's not for me to decide either or for anybody, but thinking about a bigger picture, it's like, okay, if I follow that career path and it takes time and effort, I'm so happy about it, doesn't mean I can't do the other side. It's just a different way than maybe it was for my mother or my father when they were 20 and they just had their own kids. There wasn't an adoption option. There wasn't a nieces and nephews, you had to have your own. It's different now.
Yeah.
So I've seen that shift big time in how people think, and just getting it out there, the way to put it that way. And if you can become comfortable with that, then I think you're going to have a great life and be a productive member of society and follow your career and, still fulfill that.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that because hearing you say that just makes me think about like what you value. Like, what do you value? And I feel like even I have friends that are my age that want to be moms in the next 3 years, and they really connect with that. And that's like a priority for them. And it's like, that's great. And I think when you know what you value and what you want in the season of your life and what you want to try more of, or just like kind of like what fulfills you, I would say. Like, you said there's more dogs in it. I love my dog. I treat him like my son. He gets a little birthday patty. Like, that makes me so happy being with him. But I really like my freedom of just like waking up whenever I want, picking up and going when I want. And like, that's working for me right now. Who knows? Maybe in like my late 30s or mid 30s, it might be a little different. So I'm curious to know how my mindset will continue. And I think something that I trying to practice more with myself is being okay with changing my mind or having different perspectives as I get older, because my experience and the things I've lived and gone through, I feel like have shaped me. And I'm continuing to learning more about myself and just staying curious about myself and excited for what I want to try. I'm just like, hey, like, that's okay. Like, it's okay not to have it all figured it out and have all the answers right now. Like, it's okay to be exploring.
No, I think you're right on the money there. And that's why I like these long form podcasts, because you get to see the bigger picture of both sides, why people think the way that they do. If you just get lost on the internet, you're going to hear a lot of stuff from both sides that, the big group of women saying it's all men's fault because they don't take care of themselves. They don't improve themselves. And that's why I'm doing all this. And then the guys' side saying women aren't as feminine as they used to be. And actually, you pull back from the extremes of both ends. There's actually a lot of wiggle room in the middle. We have a lot of advantages in this country, like we talked about earlier, but it comes with the fact that things need to change. And we're the first generation that has to lay the foundation down. So because our generation just doesn't have experience to say, hey, how'd you do it, mom? I don't know. It was different for me. So we have to create that. And anytime you create something new, I'm winging it. We're
figuring this out.
Exactly. So you're going to have all the uncertainties because you just don't know. You just know this is what I'm going to do. 40, 50 years, come and ask me later if it was the right decision to make, but we're going with it now.
No, yeah, I love that you say that, because I think earlier you mentioned a little bit about like, the privilege that we have in this country and the access and education and other places of the world, having a partner, having the family to provide, and like the kids then taking care of it. Like, just kind of like, it reminded me of like when I shared with you that I wanted safety and security. Like, that can look very different for a lot of people in different ways based on where you're at in this world. So maybe your priority is to create a family to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or like, it just got me thinking about that, of like, I feel at the end of the day, people want safety and security, and that can look different for other people.
It is. And people forget we're about 8 billion people on this planet. To put it into perspective, like, our species has been around about 300,000 years that we know of. Of course, it can change as they find more fossils. But in 1920 or so, there was about 2 billion people on the planet. So it took almost 300,000 years to get to 2 billion. And in 100 years, we've times that by 4. This whole thing is brand new. And people, when they step back and realize, that makes a big difference why we are doing things different. But there's 4 times as many people on the planet. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Things are going to have to change to make it happen. But in some parts of the world, there is that whole security thing. So for many women, and we don't like to talk about it as much, but for many women, it is a secure thing. They have to get married and have kids because that's that safety and security thing. Because of where they live in countries in Africa or in Asia, that's the only thing you can do. Or you live in countries like Saudi Arabia that are really oppressive, and it's either you do that or you could literally lose your life. So, that's a whole other conversation.
I'm like, it's different. It's depending where you're in the world, for sure.
And I really do wish that more people in our country, especially if you grew up here and this is all you take a step back to realize we have a lot of problems. It could be a lot worse somewhere else. Then it's okay. Seeing that, you're like, all right, maybe I don't have it so bad. And my problems, while they are important to me, in the grand scheme of things, somebody else has a much bigger thing going on.
Yeah, and I think that would be helpful, especially for people. I know you've talked about like people like, this, just kind of like, if you do have a problem, especially, here, like speaking about like in this area, in this country, of like, and if connecting it to like what you can control and what you can't control. In some countries, there's some things that people there can't, there's just not much they can do based on like policies or things like that. But I feel like when it comes to your day to day, your mindset, your decisions that you make, it's like what can control and what you can't you not control. And then kind of like who can support you with this? Who can mentor you? Who can advise you? Who can maybe provide a different perspective? Whether it could be within fitness, career, mental health, maybe higher ed, or just
Yeah.
like, hey, you have your experience of starting your podcast. Like, just who can you turn to that can help you think differently or make you think about things that you probably have never been asked about before.
Well, let's talk about finances. And I'm sure that's something that comes up a lot when people are saying, I want to follow this career or this passion, but the money isn't there or it's not there now. And I have to balance what's more important to which. And people forget in Silicon Valley, if you're from around here, you know it. But if you're not from Silicon Valley or San Francisco, it's hard pressed to believe that to try and buy a home here, a million is at the bare bottom.
Barely.
Exactly. Like it's not uncommon to have a house around here that's $2 million. Yet if you picked it up and put it somewhere in the Midwest, it's worth $150,000. Same exact home because there's nowhere else to build here. So everybody who wants to come to Silicon Valley,
We'll have to pay it.
exactly. There's no more houses, so the price just gets jacked up. So if you want to stay here in the Bay Area and you want to have a career, now you're faced with these incredible costs of living, and you're like, wow. I want to do this, but I can't afford that on this salary here. So what do I do? And then you change your mindset. Well, then do I need the big house? Is it better for me to rent as opposed to own? Because I've been told that owning was the way to go. And if you don't own, you're just throwing your money away, which is absolutely not true.
Correct.
And people are seeing that now. Like I rent and I'm able to invest more money by renting than if I bought the same exact place that I live in. When you factor in HOA dues, mortgage, and then how much your mortgage is,
There's so
I'd be
many
losing
fees.
money.
Yeah. There's so many fees people don't think about or
They
know about.
exactly. So when you talk finances with your female clients, do they think about long-term retirement? Do they see it that way, or are they thinking, okay, I need to find something that makes me to live the life that I want to live now?
Yeah. So when I meet with clients, we definitely have the conversation of like, okay, what's your current salary? And like, just hypothetically, what range are you shooting for? When we talk about that range, obviously, when it comes to salary, there needs to be research on like the area of living, like how much is the medium of that role? Do you need a management role to make to that bracket? And every organization pays differently. And then it goes to like negotiating salary. So there's a whole perspective after that. But I think when we have those conversations, it's kind of like, what salary are you kind of aiming towards based on like where you're at right now with your experience and also the area you're living in? I have a friend that actually lived in San Jose right after undergrad, and she actually moved to Sacramento because she wanted to be able to invest more, and the rent over there was more manageable than here. So I think it connects back to like what is it that you're valuing, and that's something I talk to with my clients of like, what do you value right now, and like what's a priority right now? Maybe right now you are willing to invest more for your retirement. Some of these roles have 401ks, 403bs if you're in education. So really finding those like retirement options, and also like, do you have a Roth IRA, or like, maybe investing in a money coach to work on these areas specifically. But the conversation is more of like, I'm in this salary bracket. That's kind of one of the reasons I left one of my roles. They weren't paying me more, like the salary wasn't increasing each year. So something I always tell my clients during interviews and things I've practiced when I have interviews is like, how does the salary increase work in this role, in this specific organization? Because some will give you 10% increase every year. Some will give you 5, some 3. It all depends where you're at, but some won't. I have a client right now. She's never gotten a salary increase since she started, and she's been there for almost 2 years. So it's like, that's not okay. So,
Yeah.
and she didn't know until I asked her, I'm like, do you know if you've gotten a salary increase? She's like, no, I actually don't know. And I'm like, okay, these are things we need to know. Because if your current role, the organization you're in, doesn't value this, and that's something you value, getting salary increases and things like that, then we might need to pivot to a different organization. Maybe still doing the same work that you do, but maybe an organization that helps meet one of your needs.
How big of a factor, if you get into this, is debt with people? Are they talking about, I got this much in student loans, so I can't afford to go do that career, or I racked up the credit cards? Are people honest with you about that? And how deep do you get into, here's your liabilities right now that you have to address?
Yeah, so I feel like with my clients, the finance conversation it comes up more when they're trying to pick a salary range. Or if they're talking about like, should I go to grad school? Like, is that the next thing for me based on like what they want to do? So, because sometimes if you don't have your career figured out, sometimes people feel like, oh, grad school's the answer. And that's not always the case. And then some people are like, like if you want to be a therapist, you have to go get your license and all these things. So it's like kind of like, what's the goal for your career and what steps do you need to take to get there? Yes, you might have to be in debt to get your master's degree, and are you okay with that? Like, for me, I do not care that I have my debt because it allowed me to get to the career where I'm at. But I know everyone feels different about money. Everyone has different money, like traumas or wounds or experiences. That for me, I just ask myself, what do I need to be able to get there, and how can I support myself through that, or get the support resources or scholarships? But I feel like the debt conversation comes up when it's like, should I go to grad school, but I'm going to go 20K more in debt than I already am when it comes to student loans.
Yeah, grad school is ridiculous. I mean, you've been there too, so you know how much it costs.
Especially in USF, yes.
Yeah, it is. It is ridiculous, and we have something. I'm not going to get into all the numbers, but there's a lot of student debt out there, and to go and to start your career knowing that you're maybe multiple zeros in debt on that bill that you have due every month, it can be a challenge for people, and it sort of puts them in a position where, I guess I have to follow that career that I spent all of this money on, because if I don't, it's a waste of time. One thing that I've seen people do is, well, let's take medical school. You go to medical school, you get that degree, you're a couple $100,000 in the hole, and then you go what they call residency. You go try to be a residency at a place, you're making a little bit of money. And then you get there, maybe with the expectation that if I do a couple years of residency here, I might be able to secure a job at this place here. And then it doesn't happen. Or maybe even in tech, since we're in Silicon Valley over here. Maybe you go and you get that degree in engineering or computer science, and then you go do an intern at Google, thinking that, okay, I'm going to put my time in here as an intern, get paid little to nothing. And then they're just going to put me right into a role where I can make a lot of money and secure my future. And then Google comes back and says, sorry, not only are we not doing that, but we're laying off people. So you're SOL. And then you're back to square one. Have you had clients in a similar spot like that?
I actually haven't had clients that have gotten laid off or been in a situation like that. But something that you mentioned that stood out to me is like, I think it's so common for people to want that security of the job. Like, if I go into this career, I'm secured a job right after graduation. And that's not the case. I think like no one can guarantee you a job. That's just facts. No one can be like, hey, once you graduate, I'm going to give you a job. One, you don't know if that person's still going to be there. Two, life's not guaranteed. We don't even know if the world will be here tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know what could happen. So I think when people do have those topics or conversation of like, because I get that when I work with my college students, like, if I go in computer science, I'm going to be guaranteed a job. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, tell me more. No one can guarantee you a job. I like to ask them and tell them, like, how can you create these opportunities for yourself right now? So if no one can guarantee you a job, what are some things you can do right now during undergrad or after you graduated? For example, how can you start building community with people in those careers right now? Doesn't mean they're going to guarantee you a job, but like, are you going to be able to learn with them, connect with them? Maybe all my jobs that I've gotten has been because of my community, and more of like even the jobs I've been informed about. My professors, my mentors, my supervisors are like, hey, they're hiring here. Look at this job position. My last role, my current role right now, a friend of mine, he's like, hey, I think you would be great at this. Check it out. And again, I get to choose if I want to apply to it or not. But it's like, how can you create your opportunities? Because no one can guarantee you a job.
Yeah.
Like, how can you create them by, again, creating community, going to career events, career fairs, connecting with people in the career you're interested in or want to learn more about. It doesn't mean you have to go into the career you're interested. Like, I could always come to you and be like, hey, like, what did you do when you started your career? Who were some people that helped you? What do you wish you would have had during that time to be able to transition smoothly into your role? So things like that.
Do you think people think about the culture of a company they might go into, or what the day-in-day life actually is? Or do people get so focused on the benefits and the salary and that's it? And then get there and you realize maybe it's a cubicle job. I'm sitting in front of a computer for 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't talk to my coworkers. And then things start to change. Have you seen instances like that come up, or stories like that come up?
100%. I feel like, especially as a recent grad, you just go in, you're like, I just need a job. I need a salary. Anyone who's willing to take me, right? And then when you start doing the role, you start learning like, wow, I do not like the culture here. And it's so important to ask you can ask when you're getting interviewed, and then you ask the people who are interviewing questions. There's questions you can ask to get some information, and then you can make a decision based on that. But again, you're not going to know until you're in the role and in that culture, into the organization. So what I like to talk to my clients about is like, what are your needs in a role when you are in a space? Do you need flexibility? Do you need clear communication from your manager? And if this or like the salary increases every year, do they take inflation in consideration? I know my role does. So like, kind of like, what are your needs, your non-negotiable needs in a role, in a career? And is this career and organization fitting them? Like my last role, I loved it. If they would have met my non-negotiable needs, I would have stayed there because I loved what I was doing on the day to day, what I was doing with my students, but they weren't meeting my non-negotiable needs as when it came to my salary increases. And that was something that I'm like, well, I have goals for myself. And now I have a role that gives me
Gotcha.
that need.
That's good. Now you may disagree with me on this, but if you do, we're going to hash it out.
Let's have a conversation, of course.
I'm a very big believer in that my job is my job, and I do not expect my job to fulfill all my needs in the world. To me, you pay me to do something, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do the best I can. But when I leave, that's it. I don't expect to make a lot of friends. I don't expect my best friends to be there. I don't expect to have them have my needs coddled. I don't expect to be fulfilled in all these different things. If I have some of those, great. But I have a job. I go there because I'm there to get a salary and be the best that I can be at that job. And I think a lot of more younger people, probably more Gen Zers, have this mindset that not only do I have to make 6 figures at my job, but I have to have my best friends. I have to have nap pods. They have to give me free food. I have to have my purpose. They have to fulfill every need. And that it's supposed to do all this. And when they get in there, it's a culture shock because these are businesses. They have to make money, otherwise they can't pay you. And sometimes that might mean you don't have that ideal job that does everything for you, which is okay because it's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to.
So you can go outside and fulfill the other needs. Like even this podcast here, we talked about my job and how I enjoy it and how I like it, but I don't expect it to fulfill everything in my life. And these conversations that we have are how I can fill in the gaps in my overall picture, which ironically makes me better at my job because the mental health issue becomes less of an issue, and it makes me fill in all the gaps about my personality and what I want to do in life. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually agree with you. I feel like you shouldn't put one thing to fulfill all your needs. And I guess just to like maybe clarify like what your needs in a role is like, are there room for growth in this organization? Is that something you need for your professional development? Is there salary increases? Is there flexibility on the schedule? Like kind of needs like that. Like I feel like I have met people who, even people I work with, they're very like, I'm not really here to make friends. And I feel like everyone should have the right to choose. Again, like even though I love my job, it doesn't meet all my needs. That's why I go to dance class. That's why I go to spend time. That's why I go to brunch with my friends. I travel. I do all these things. And I feel like outside of your job, you should have things that fill your cup. You should have things that you enjoy and that you're passionate about, because maybe not everything you do at work is going to make you super happy. I know I don't like entering data, so like things like that. So no, I agree with you. I think like your job and your coworkers are not responsible to like fulfill X, Y, and Z. Is more of like, what do you need in a role? Like maybe if it's not like your coworkers being your friends, it's more of like, are my coworkers open to have conversation and brainstorm about this topic? Or are they not? Like kind of like what makes you feel safe and comfortable in a role setting? And that's kind of like the needs I think about. But no, I agree with you. I don't think your job should be responsible for your happiness.
Now, do some of your clients understand that, or is that surprisingly something that we have to get out of the way right away? Like, okay, you want to do this, but let's be real about what you can really expect from it.
I feel like when they come to me, they don't even know what their needs are or just like what they want in it. They're just burnt out and tired of where they're at and so unhappy that they don't even see that part yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So that's so with my clients, we try to get there because then I'm like, okay, like what's currently going in your role that's making you feel this way? And that's when they're like, oh, well, they're like overworking us. Like I take work home, or like they'll start giving some examples. And like during our time work together, I'm like, okay, what do you need? And I feel like we always talk about like, what are some flexibilities? Because life's not perfect. Life's not guaranteed like, oh, this is what you're going to get, not get, or whatever. But it's like, what are you like flexible about here? Like for just to give you a recent example, one of my clients, she really wants to work with students in higher ed, but she's like, I'm flexible right now to work with like elementary, middle school, or high schoolers, just because I need my clinical hours right now. Because her long-term goal is to be a therapist and have her own practice. So she's flexible in that area. Just to give you an example.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay, I'm glad that actually you're not seeing that a lot, where it's my job is supposed to do all of this for me and it's not doing it and help me. Do I need to do something else? So at least that part we can definitely address.
Yeah.
But how big, and this ties back to the whole financial thing, and I can tell you from my own example, as not just in my industry but other industries, once you get that first paycheck and you realize, man, this is more money than I've ever had in my entire life. Then you start buying, for guys especially, you buy the toys, you buy the boats, you buy the big trucks, you buy the newest and latest greatest gadgets. And then before you know it, you get locked into that salary because you have to support the lifestyle that you just started building up. And then later you may realize that that job at Google or Facebook or whatever isn't what you wanted. And now you see the other side of it, or see that there's no upper mobility, but you can't just leave because you got bills that have to be paid for life that you started based on that. And then you get stuck. And then I see people get stuck in some jobs that they don't like. Cubicle jobs are a big one. And then they get bitter because I put myself in a position where I have to stay here because the salary is so good, but now I don't like it and I can't leave because of it. So I just get resentful of my coworkers, or the layoffs are coming and then they're going to get me because I haven't been here the less. And so you start seeing that, which ties back to the mental health issue. All coming back for me. I see a lot with the money side, and then for some of it is the culture side. Have you seen any of that?
I haven't seen that. I feel like the population I work with is more like, I feel like I totally agree with the whole money. Like, I remember when I got my first check after college, I was like, oh my God, I used to make that in like 4 months, you know what I mean? Or 3 months. So I feel like it's so easy to like be like, oh my God, I'm going to buy myself everything I didn't have, or everything I've wanted and I've had to wait for, right?
Get the Gucci belt.
Yeah, the Gucci belt, like get all these brand things. And I feel like social media definitely has this influence of like what you should have. I still don't own a brand bag, maybe one day, but that's not a priority right now. I'd rather travel and see the world. So I think it goes back to like your values and your priorities and what makes you feel fulfilled and what do you want to invest your time in and your energy and like being your authentic self. But I have heard of people staying in roles because of their salary. So my current clients come to me more because they want to make more. So they're not really like, oh, I'm staying here because I hate it, but I'm not like, it's more, they're like, I want to make more and I want to find a role that I enjoy that allows me to make more. But when I have heard of people staying in jobs that make them unhappy, but their pay is like really good if meets their financial needs or things like their enjoyments and all that, I think like life comes down to decisions. Maybe for your first 5 years after getting those checks, you're like, oh my God, I got to buy myself all these great things. But does that still fulfill you now? Like, and if it does, like, you need to be real about how it's going to continue if you want to continue making those decisions and choices. And if you don't want to, you want something different, like what small steps can you start taking today? Maybe it could look different for everyone because I feel we all value different things. But I feel like I would, even if I had a job that would pay me $500K a year, but if I hated it being there, I'm going to go home and sleep all day and then just repeat. Like, I wouldn't have the energy to spend time with friends. I would be that friend that tells them, oh my God, I hate my job. And it's like, it's like, I just think about it that way. And it just goes back to like, regardless where you're on your career journey or where you're at, like you made decisions and that was like, you made the decisions that led to where you're at. And it's like, I think you need to give yourself grace that you did the best you could with the knowledge you had. But it's like, what decisions can you make now that will help you, your current and your future self?
Yeah. And I think if people, especially couples, like that communication has to happen way early on. It's not just, hey, let's just do it. Like, let's just have kids and we'll figure it out. And there is no figuring it out afterwards. You better have that conversation now. Who's doing what? Who's working more? Because otherwise those bills are going to pile up and then you both have to work. And then you get tied down to, well, I'm stuck here because I need the paycheck and little Joey's depending on me. And I'm not knocking anybody who has kids. Matter of fact, I think kids are the best thing that we can do as a culture and as a society. And I see a lot of people who are working their rear ends off because they want to have that great life for their children and they're doing everything that they can. But the mind shift is different. The mind shift is, I want to see my son or daughter or the multiple kids have the best life that they can. So I will work my rear end out to make sure that they are happy, successful, and they have everything that they need. So it allows them to be okay with the job that they're doing because they know it's not about them anymore. They know it's about the kids. And when they make that mindset shift, it works versus you're in this middle land of, yeah, I want their life to be good, but what about me? And then, okay, well, you have kids, not about you anymore. My
Yeah.
opinion anyway.
No, yeah, and then I feel like in those situations, like if someone's unhappy but they need like a salary that's in the same range because they do have a family to provide for, it's like how can you still find a role that it's not draining you? Because I feel like, well, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak from experience, but I see it as like if you hate your job and you're drained, you're going to take the energy home to your kids. You're not going to have the energy to play with them, to answer their questions. Kids ask a lot of questions, and
Yeah.
you're going to feel like feel like you might be like, oh, like go play on your iPad, go watch TV. And it's like why did you want to be a parent? What's the purpose of being a parent for you? It could be different for everyone. But I think like even if you need a salary range, how can you continue that salary? Maybe doing a different roles or like maybe creating your own business for something you're really passionate about or really enjoy. But I think it goes back to like people like care a lot what others will think so much.
Yeah,
And it's like, why?
I know. And you brought up the whole iPad thing. See how the problems, not problem, but see how things get bigger the more that you bring in these other elements. For our generation, the millennials, we both have to work to make ends meet. You don't have time to invest with your children as much as maybe our parents or grandparents did. But this technology exists now called the iPad or the iPhone. So we tend to be like, all right, just go play Angry Birds or
You don't
whatever
have the
on it.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your kids are occupied and you get to work on what you got to do at home and life seems to be good. But now we see with Generation Z, they've been raised on the iPad and the iPhone. Overall, there's definitely exceptions nonetheless. But from what I've seen in personal experience, a lot of these young people who today are in their early 20s, late teens, they're so used to being in front of a screen that they can't have a conversation with people in real life. And now, if that's the way the generation goes, it's sort of going back to a reflection of what did we have to do as a millennials to raise our children? We had to both work, but to have them, we sort of had to utilize technology. And you see 10 years down the line, if things aren't done the best way possible, this could be a result where now the children are raised without social skills because the computer's been in front of them the whole time. Nobody's fault. You try to do the best thing.
Yeah.
And these are just things that we're learning along the way.
Like the ripple effect. Like
Exactly.
because of these decisions.
Right. So hopefully, as time goes on and we see that, we can make the corrections and say, you know what, maybe what's better for us. Maybe we find partners who are both on the same page. Like, hey, if you want family, then okay, I'll do all the work and I'll work my rear end off, but I would like you to be at home more
Yeah.
because I want my child to be raised with those family values. I was telling somebody back in the day, we used to go out and ride our bikes and play and get in trouble. And
I have so many scars
Fall
on my
down.
knees from falling.
Yeah.
Like running around.
it would just, go out and play and meet new friends, do what you
Yeah.
got to do. And then with technology, you're just inside more and your friends are seeing through the screen. You're playing video games with people from around the world. And it's not the same as interacting. I remember I went on a call for service once and I asked the lady who her friends are, and she named me screen names like John 36 whatever.
Like
And I'm
video
like,
games.
no, what's their real name? I don't know. I know them as this. Well, where are they at? They're in China. Oh, so okay, that's your best friend is
Okay.
literally online, and this is just one example. So don't take that for everything that's worth. But the idea was, best friends are now people you've never met, but you know them through a screen or you know them through a bot. Kind of dangerous to see what the future of that's going to be.
Yeah, it just makes me think about like I had so much my childhood was so much fun. Like playing outside, falling, like meeting your neighbors, playing basketball. Like it was just so active and fun and it's like now again you mentioned your mom worked too and your parents worked. So it's like I remember my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So my dad was like, "Oh, I'll take care of everything. Like you stay at home." So I'm thankful we had her there, but I remember also like we were just outside always playing and like that was fun.
Yeah.
And I can think about now, like, yeah, again, I don't have kids, so I can't really give an example or anything, but I do see that a lot with the younger. And it's like the parents, especially if they have a job they hate, they're tired. They're not, I don't blame them not to have the energy to entertain their kid or play with them. So
Yeah.
definitely a case by case.
It's a case by case, but I'm glad that your industry exists because it's a way to tell people this is the traditional way that we were sort of raised, but because of the dynamics of what we're in now, the technology, finances, and pretty much
Everything's
everything
so
America
expensive.
has, there's a new way to look at it that we don't have examples for. So we're all trying to figure it out and say, maybe that new way means we don't do these things that our parents did because there's no need to. Or maybe it's altered and we're going to lay the foundation for Gen Z and Generation Alpha and Beta, whatever their new acronyms are going to be, because we're all still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to split this up so people can understand. So when you say life and career coach, if you were to break it down percentage wise, what percentage is mostly more about helping people figure out their life versus specifically their career needs?
Yeah. So I feel like 90% is more career. And I feel like, I've been specifically on my online coaching it's going to be 2 years this November, I think. And the reason I have life in there, it's like the 10% because your life does influence the way you make your career decisions. Whether, I would say most of our calls with my coaches are like, again, like 90% we're talking about career decisions, thoughts about your career, exploration career. But in every client I've had, the way they're living their life in this moment has influenced. Like I had a former client, she lives in Stockton area. And when we were talking about careers and salary, she's like, oh, the salary Stockton is a little less than in San Jose. And she's used to San Jose salary. So I was like, okay, like what life decisions are you willing to make? Because she has her house there. So it's like, are you willing to leave your house? So I feel like the life conversation comes up whether you want to or not. It's like, it's going to influence your career decisions. Right now, if I were to want to move abroad, like my life decisions are going to influence the career decisions I make as well. So it's more of like helping them with the career 90% of the time, but I want them to know like your life is going to influence you. Like if you come to me, you're like, I want this salary, I want this job. I'm not going to be that coach to be like, oh, here it is, like apply. It's like, no, there's so many factors that play into making career decisions. Like even if you go to a job that makes more money, if that's one thing you want, are you going to be happy? Are you going to be like fulfilled? Is that going to connect to your passion or your purpose of like the impact you want to have in this world? And most of the clients that come to me is because they want to help people. If I were to summarize, it's more like they want to help people. They just don't know in what careers or how to do that or how to get those opportunities. They don't know how to get started. They're just like, I haven't gotten a job. I'm still working at my first job after college, but I'm stuck. Or like, I never got a job in my field. Like, I don't even know how to get started. Or, oh, this is a big one too. Getting rejected from jobs after graduating undergrad or grad school. That's so discouraging that they're like, well, I'm just going to go work at this store or I'm going to go work here. Or I'm going to work what I know, because it's so discouraging to get no's, of course. But it's like how to like navigate those life things that come up as you make these career pivots and decisions, and reminding yourself like it's possible for you too. And just because someone didn't get it, someone's like, oh, I had to wait 6 months to hear back and this person heard once. Everyone's journey is different and everyone's organization is different, so they reach out differently. So I think like normalizing different paths, because I can see there's a lot of comparison of like, oh, well, so and so got their job right after, like they must have done everything
now
right.
That's something that I always hear about. And even for me, graduating in 05 from college, it was even worse. Well, I would say it's worse, but it was a different time back then. The idea that just because you have the degree, you're sort of gonna get the big figure job, and then you kind of don't realize you just got your education done. But if I'm an employer, no matter what I'm doing, education is great. But what experience do you have? What life experience do you have? And that is a big part that I think people forget, that you may finish college, you may have to work at pennies on the dollar just to get the experience in whatever industry that you're doing for a couple of years. So you can then apply to that job that you want with the education, with some experience. And plus it shows that you're willing to make that sort of commitment to this new employer. That, wow, you're 27, but you just worked the last 2 years not making anything and you got that. Wow. We want that kind of work ethic over here. Have you seen that?
I've seen like wanting to get the job, but it's like your experience matters. So yeah, taking it back to like, just because you have the degree as an employer, I was in hiring committees. Yeah, your degree's there, as in like you can finish a BA and a master's, but
we can check that box.
Yeah, but it's like when we're looking at resumes to know who we're going to bring to interview, we look as like, okay, this is the position we're looking for. We're looking for someone who has experience in X, Y, and Z. Does your resume mirror that? Does your resume give me transferable skills or transferable examples that can be applied here? Enough for me to invite you to an interview. I think there's one thing that you mentioned about like, oh, are you willing to like kind of do this for 2 years or to get the experience? And I think that's so important, because I feel sometimes people are like, well, I have the degree, I should just jump in. But it's like, let's say if I wanted to change careers, I always say if I would have changed a different career, I would have been like criminologist and like investigating like the thought work. So I'm like, okay, let's say I wanted to pivot. what do I need to do? I would have to start from like not square one. I would start from experience still, but like that's a different industry that would be like, what do I need to do to get to where I want to get to? And it's okay starting like again or being a newbie at something. I feel like the uncomfortableness can sometimes take over us and like, oh, you should know this by now if you're this old. Like if your age is at this number, you should know. It's like, no, like that's not the case. We're all learning. We're all learning. And I think that's beautiful that we're all learning because the world's like growing and developing. And I think new perspectives help. So,
Well, on a side note with that, that was a huge thing for my sister's generation, Gen X. Once you're 18, you're sort of expected to just get out there in the world. For my generation, it was once you graduate college, 22, 23, that's when you're supposed to get out there. That keeps getting pushed back. So it's the norm now, I think, for people, young people to understand. First of all, your mind doesn't even fully develop until you're about 25 years old. So staying at home till 26, as long as you're making progress and you're gaining experience, is nothing to be ashamed about. And I'm sure your
correct.
parents will understand that as long as you're getting some sort of experience and your parents can help you by taking the rent off of your plate so you can go do that unpaid internship to get that job that you will get paid for down the line. It's a longer thought process. But there is that, well, you're 25, you just graduated. Shouldn't you be out of the house right now? It's no. And I think parents of our generation, the millennials, are going to figure that out when their kids get out of college. It's he or she might be there for another 4 or 5 years at home because they need to get that life experience that they can only get with maybe working for pennies on the dollar. And then they can put their education and life experience together and then go out and get the jobs.
Correct.
So if you're comfortable knowing that in advance, that might be the wave of the future.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that because, yeah, tying it back to experience, like, again, your degree does not equal your career path because my degrees are both in teaching. Like, if you look at my degrees as teacher prep, like social sciences. But if you look at my resume, it's transferred to higher ed, one-on-one advising, coaching because of my undergrad roles. At that age, I didn't know that experience was important. I just saw it as like, I don't want to wait till I graduate to help students. That's how I saw it. But if no one would have told me and I would have just worked at a restaurant for college to pay for school, I would have graduated with like just that experience. And I was like, okay, now what? Like, I would have to start later with that experience because I didn't do it during undergrad. So I feel like information, I think that's why you having these podcasts are just like people who share value or information on tips and like what you can start thinking about or doing are so helpful to get that experience. Or, some people do move back home after college. I know for me that was not an option, but I'm willing to make the sacrifice of, maybe having more debt for grad school because of that. So just like goes back to decisions.
Exactly. And then it affects, we'll get into a little more of the social side. It affects your dating life because it takes, for guys specifically, it takes us a long time to get that traction going. I mean, I was probably in my mid 30s when I really got good traction going in my life. But if you'd have told me that at 21, I had to wait till 35, I would have said, I got to wait 14 years. What's the problem here? But it took a lot of falling down, a lot of getting fired, a lot of learning different jobs, working at places you didn't want to work at to get the experience, getting rejected, getting told that you need more of this, and then going for more education. It's a lot. And sometimes you have to really humble yourself. So for a lot of guys who put the work in for themselves, it's not until they get into their mid to late 30s that they're now at the prime to be able to say, I got my finances in order. I paid off that student debt or whatever it is. I'm making good money now. I'm planning long term. I learned how to take care of myself financially and physically. Now this is my golden era. If you put the work in for it. And I think that's from the guy's side of it. What would you say?
I'm curious to know. Yeah, I'm like, no, thank you for sharing that. And I feel like experience is your best teacher.
I mean, it makes sense why you see a lot of men and women who are together, why the guy's usually older. It's because that life experience that he put the work in, it shows because he shows that he can take care of somebody else, that he's got his head on straight. Doesn't mean he doesn't want to go have fun and do other things, but it means that he's gotten the experience that the 25-year-old doesn't have. And that shows long term, especially if you're somebody that says you want to think about having a family with somebody. Well, the guy who's 40 that's got his act together is a little bit more in line.
28.
Yeah, now the 25-year-old, we were having fun. We were going to beaches. We were doing bonfires and just living it up and then drinking all the time. And then not realizing, oh, what's the bigger thing in the long term? Yeah, you got to put all that work in, son, for at least a good decade. And then it's a marathon. You still have to do it. You still have to learn how to get better. This thing here, all this stuff I had to learn on my own, how to buy this, how to put that together, how to edit, how to boot. It's a big project, but it challenges you every day. That's a huge one, is that I see so many people get stagnant. They cross that finish line. Okay, I made it. I got $100,000 a year. I can just sit back. I can relax. And then you just start going down because you realize now this is the finish line. That's all there is.
It's like, what else is there in life, right? Like, I think they get stuck, but it's like you can always explore passions, or, like you did this podcast, or just things that you're like, what do I want to do? What do I want to try out and create? Like, I think you can create things, and I think that's beautiful at any age. Yeah.
Absolutely. So going back to being on the hiring committee, what are some tips you can give people to say from the other side? Here's some answers that I've heard that just really, if you say those, that doesn't cut it. Or these are the things that we're looking for.
I would say the tip I would give for you to be invited to an interview, let's say that. The first step is like making sure you're not submitting the same resume to every position, because it's so easy to spot that. I think it's very important for you to tailor it, especially if you're applying to similar jobs. You don't have to change it that much, but tailor it to the position that you are applying to. And the biggest tip is like read the job description and your resume, and does it mirror it? It doesn't mean, like, some people might say like, well, what if I don't have that experience? I don't want to lie, or something like that. It's like, no, it's not about lying. It's like, do you have transferable skills, and can you apply them? And if you can't, that's okay. You don't have to, but just look at the job description, look at your experience, and is there like transferable examples and mirrors that could apply to that role? Like, even if you didn't do that exact thing that they're asking you to do, like, how did you do coordination, like, or programming, or for example, for me, even though I was in the teaching career and all of that, like, my experience, I did workshops. Now I do workshops in my role. Like, how can you transfer that? Like, yeah, maybe you were doing workshops for staff, but maybe you're doing workshops now for the students. So
Gotcha.
transferable skills like that. When you get invited people who don't get invited to interviews is because your experience does not match our job description. You're not what we're looking for. Just
Gotcha.
to keep it as simple.
Well, on that point there, what are some of the biggest things that you can say? These are the biggest resume mistakes that I see.
I would say the mistake would be like, it's like, this resume doesn't match this career or this role. I would say that's the biggest mistake that I've seen. Another mistake is people not spelling things out. You can't assume people know the abbreviations of your current role or what you're talking about. So, for example, for me, when I was a student, I worked at the Educational Opportunity Program. Short, it's EOP. Let's say I was applying somewhere and someone doesn't know. They might know, but what if they don't? You can't assume people know the abbreviations. So always spell everything out. Make sure your sentences and your sentences in your resume, I like to see it as a storytelling. If you were to explain someone your role, by reading this, do they know what you do, how you do it, and the results of that? That's kind of like, as someone who looks at resumes, that's what I look for. I'm like, oh wow, now I know, because I don't do your job, but can you tell me based on what I'm reading, and can I see what result you're going to get me from what you do? And then once you get invited to an interview and you're there, I think the biggest tip I can give based on like my experience interviewing people would be your authentic self. Yes, you get nervous, it's normal, but I feel like when people are not just interviewing based on your skills, especially, well, I've interviewed in the education field, but they want to know your skills, great, but they also want to know who I'm going to work with. So that plays a role too in decision making.
You know how hard that is to tell people to be their authentic self? Because most people are going to say, well, what does that mean? This is who I am. And I think that ties back to the social skills. If you don't know how to talk to people, you don't know how to convey who you really are to them. You just think, well, I snowboard and I like to type, and I think I would be good at the job. That's authentically who I am. Is that what you want? And then you're like, wait, something's wrong here.
No, yeah, it's like, and that's why I think coaching and mentoring is so powerful, because you can help people have these opportunities of like practicing how to advocate for themselves, how to like, I feel there's also this thing of like, well, I don't want to come off I'm showing off, or I'm like, all of that. It's like, you're stating your like the confidence that comes in. I think being confident at what you do can help you so much when you come in interviews specifically, because, well, I guess going back to the tip of like when you come in and like being authentic self, some people, like you said, might be like, what does that mean? What does that, I would say if that's a little confused, it's kind of like, how, like, do you believe on the work you do, and are you confident with what you have? And like when people are interviewing you, really answering the questions. One mistake I've seen so much, two mistakes. One, people are not answering the questions. And then you're, as a listener, you're just like, okay, like you're just going on a tangent. You're not really answering and giving an example or anything like that. And two, sometimes people don't really read our website or know our mission or know what we're about. They'll not mispronounce. They'll like, no, I feel like for our program, they named it wrong. I think they put, so it was education opportunity program. I think they said something else. I don't know if it was for the E or the O. We're like, oh my God, they got the name wrong. They don't even know the name of the program. So those would be the two main mistakes, I think.
Something as simple as just, did you read the website? Do you know how many people work here? Do you know what the mission statement is? Because that's kind of important, even though it sounds so simple and stupid. And no, that shows that you at least did the research on
Yeah,
there.
that you actually want to be. You're not just applying. How do we not know? You'd apply to 50 other jobs.
Yeah. But I think that confidence thing that you're talking about, for me, I relate that to life experience, which is just time out there meeting people and getting other jobs. Because unless you have that and you go into these interviews, you might be able to answer the questions verbatim. Okay, you said the right thing, but then why is it not sticking? In order for us to hire a police officer, when you apply, you have to go through an oral panel interview. That's one of the first steps. So usually 3 or 4 people are in there and they're asking you set questions. The questions themselves are not irrelevant, they're important, but they're pretty simple stuff. You know, like, name me a time when you were in a stressful situation and how'd you handle that? Or, you know, what does, you know, have you applied anywhere else? Very simple questions. It's not the answer to the question that we're looking for. Once we ask the question, it's who are you?
How do you think?
Exactly. Are you looking at me? You'd be surprised how many people are in these interviews and they look down. And right away, that tells us all that we need to know. So you could answer everything correctly, but if you can't even make eye contact with me, you don't realize that that's what we actually saw. And then when you're answering the questions, we're thinking, does this person fit with the culture? Can they understand the job? If they can't look at me, or their answers are more in line with maybe a different company or a different department, then this may not be the right one for them. But you can answer the questions right and think, I nailed that thing.
Yeah,
and
you could have the answer.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not the answer to the question so much as how you convey that answer. But it's, and I was 23 once, 24 once. I know how it is. I get asked these questions. I told you the right answer. What's the problem? How come
Yeah, you're like, I answered it.
Yeah, how come I didn't get the second interview? And it's because I didn't do a good job of conveying what that answer means to me. Here's the answer, but here's what it means to me. Here's how I interpret it. And I could only have gotten that with just going through life and getting experience.
Yeah, that's why I like to say experience is your best teacher. And I think holding yourself compassion and just being kind to yourself, that you did the best you could at the time you did it, like whenever, how old you were. And I feel like your experience is teaching you, like, okay, next time, like, and the confidence gets built the more you practice it. Like, I'm sure if you look back at your first episode to now, you might notice a few differences.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. My guests were great in the very beginning. Some of them were my friends. Like the first guy I had, he talked about his brain cancer and having kids and how he was able to get through that. Great guest. But if you look at what I did, the lighting was off, the camera was slightly, I don't really do scripts anyway, but I'm learning how this whole thing works. And someone told me, you sound like you're trying to fake it. I'm like, hey, it's my first one. Give me a break. I have to put myself out there to learn.
Exactly.
But 2 years later, I have a different experience on this. If I were to go somewhere else, maybe I wanted to go syndicated, let's just say, I can speak more to what I've been doing based on the years of experience. But if I did it the first time, I only have that one experience. It's not enough to go forward.
Exactly. And I feel like remembering, like, people will make their comments, right, of like, oh, like all that, but it's like, okay, like, this is what I want to do, and I'm gonna grow from it and learn from it. And it's like, look at you now.
Yeah, people are gonna say everything, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes you need to hear, like, yeah, that kind of sucked. Oh, well, good, I appreciate you telling me. If you don't tell me how you really think, I can't fix it. If everybody says, it's perfect, couldn't do any better, actually, that doesn't help me. I know I could do better, but I can't see something. So what are you seeing that I'm not?
Yeah,
it's huge.
And it's like on the wording too, like, oh, what are some areas you think I can grow in, or like, what are any feedback, or like, things like that could be helpful, because definitely wording does make people, based on how they were raised and just the way they navigate their world, like, wording can play a huge role.
That is, yeah, I can't speak any more about that. One thing you mentioned is that you have a lot of clients that are really interested in helping people. Like, their thing is, I want to go out there and make a difference. I want to go make people's lives better. And people don't really realize this unless you look at some of the history, but that's pretty much the main reason why our species still exists. Is of all the hominid species, we were the ones that developed social skills. It's ingrained in us to actually be able to support each other, because that's how our species survived through all the apocalypses and all the die-outs, because we were able to bond together. Whereas some of the other species, it was one-on-one or 1 and 2. and it wasn't enough to continue it, and they eventually just died out. And it carries with us today. All of us want to do something to help our fellow man. This is one of my ways that I wanted to do that. But this is not something that is going to pay me, 6 figures a year. I don't do it for the money. I do it because it fulfills a greater purpose that I'm trying to do. And you really realize that a lot of the things out there that bring more purpose to you for helping others, they don't necessarily reflect on the paycheck. So maybe you do have to find a job that, takes care of the paycheck and takes care of your life. But this is what really fulfills you. This is what brings you purpose. This is the long-term game. Yeah. And sometimes they're not always the same thing.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Normalizing it. Because I feel people feel like it has to be your career. It has to be you have to choose. Some people feel they have to choose. And I said, not always.
Yeah. You could have a job that makes, when this is not, to other places, this would be a lot of money. But for the Silicon Valley, you can make $65,000 a year, which is nothing over here. It's a lot somewhere else in the world, but not a lot here. Yet if you live at or below your means, and you have the time and the ability from that $65,000 a year job to go do something that you really want to do, well, you kind of fulfill both needs. So what if you don't have the $2 million house that everybody's saying you're supposed to have? So what if you don't have the Lamborghini or the BMW?
Right.
You have a car, you get from point A to point B. Whose expectations are you following? I think we all learn that as we get into our 30s, that it really doesn't matter what people think. In our 20s, we're trying to impress everybody. And then that's how we get drained on some of these car payments. Like, yeah, I guess I didn't really need that car, because what did it give me at the end of the day? A bunch of looks, and that was it.
I just want people to know that you can always make a decision that can change the reality or situation. Like, I feel like sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm stuck here. Like, I don't have another option. All right, there's nothing else I can do. It's like, well, create those options, create those opportunities. Like, how can you, like you mentioned, like the fulfillingness, like whether it's like a salary or like moving to a different place. Like, sometimes I think about, I'm like, oh, like I would love to live near the beach, and like maybe I could teach kids like a specific language or something, something, like really like exploring, like, what do you want to do? And like you say, are you fitting someone else's expectations? I know when it comes to, specifically the people I work with and my clients, I don't really see the like, oh, I'm trying to, meet this look of how my life looks and stuff like that. But there's a lot of pressure of like, you should have it figured out. You went to college, especially you being first gen, like we didn't have that. Like, you should have it figured out type of thing. So I feel like that pressure is what makes them feel like I'm 26 and I don't have the career. And it's like, that's okay. Like, it's just more of like, where you come from, I feel plays a huge role of like the expectations that are placed either culturally or based on the parents or based on society too, type of thing. But I think going back to like, what do you want? Because I feel like you can't please everyone.
Oh yeah, you have to learn that lesson early. You will never please everyone. That includes your parents or your significant other. You're going to disappoint them. Be comfortable with that, because if you try to please everybody all the time, you don't realize that you get burned out, or your mental health suffers because everybody else is happy, right? Well, sometimes that means for your mental health, you got to tell people no. That's just going to happen for overall wellness. What are some of your biggest success stories from some of the clients that you've had? Do you have that one person that you say, we had a conversation, this is what she did?
I would like to say one, just because you have mentioned the tech industry. And this client, when she came to me, she's in her late 20s. She was like, again, first gen, like, I feel so much pressure. Like, my parents, like, keep telling me like I should have it figured out by now, like like what am I doing with my life? She's like, I see my friends loving their careers, I see my friends doing great things, getting promoted, and I'm stuck. Like, I just feel stuck, all that. And I remember telling her, I'm like, she's like, I want a new job, I want a new job. And then I was like, yeah, tell me more about that, like what kind of job do you want? And then she was like, I want to go into tech. Everyone's going into tech. It seems like they're making money. I want to go into tech. And I was like, oh, okay, tell me more. Like, why tech? She's like, well, I'm just open to whatever. But through our sessions, we learned a lot more. But she was also like, one session would be like, oh, I think I'm open to this too. So she was like all over the place. And it went back to, and I asked her, I'm like, do you know what you're passionate about? Do you know what your purpose is? Like, do you know what work you want to do in this world? She's like, no one has asked me that. And we stayed with that question for a minute. We sat with it because, one, she was never really asked a question, but she's like, I also never had the opportunity to explore. I had to have it figured out. I had to pick a degree in college. I had to get a job right after college. And the job she picked, I'm like, okay, up to this point, what led you to pick those jobs? And she's like, that's all I saw. Like, my family's in education. My most of my tias are teachers. Like that's all I knew. She didn't become a teacher, but she was like a classroom like TA. Like she was at a school site. And then through our coaching, through our sessions, we explored on what she liked about her experience, what she didn't like, what she wanted to do more of, what she cared about. And I like to ask my clients, like, if money wasn't a problem or money wasn't a thing in this world, what would you do for a living? Like, what would you do on your day to day? Like, what would that look like? What's a problem in this world you want to solve? Is there something specific you want to invest your time and energy in? And through our time working together, she was like, I really care about working with former foster youth. I really care about working with homeless youth. I really care about working with the LGBTQ plus community. Like that's the community I really want to serve. I really want to help them. She's like, I just don't know how. I don't know what. So I feel like really figuring out when you know who you want to help, like the population, why you want to help them and how you're going to help them, that really helps you bring clarity on like how you want to make an impact in this world. So after our work time together, she actually did get a new job at a school site because she's like, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to. She actually had told me like, I don't want to be in schools anymore. I don't want this. And she's like, tech, because everyone's going to tech.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow, like I literally wake up to a job that I love. Like just how I told you I wanted to, because she's working with the population she cares about. She's working, providing them resources, supporting them. She's in the school setting. She's like, oh my God, I never thought I would be in a school setting again. But she's like, I enjoy it because I'm doing something that's meaningful to me. The school wasn't the problem. It was the work she was doing at the school that didn't feel fulfilling to her. And she knows why she does it, because she grew up with this community and she wants to continue supporting them in these areas. So that was such a success story for me, especially because I remember how she came to me, like her mental health was, going down the drain. She was like, I just get home and I just want to lay down. Like, I don't want to do anything. Like the thought of repeating the same job the next day was so draining for me. Like, and seeing her really care about, like, I could have helped her get a job in tech. Like, but it's like, what do you care about? You're going to be in the same boat. If you go into tech, you're going to be in the same boat. And she learned what she really cares about. And now knowing this, she can, change jobs within this industry, but she knows who she wants to help and what problems she wants to solve.
Wow. That's pretty cool that she's able to see the bigger picture through your coaching. That's awesome. So how does your program work? How do you find clients and how does your sessions work? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my one-on-one coaching program. So at the moment, I only have one offer, which is one-on-one coaching. It's for 3 months, and we meet weekly for an hour. So usually, the way clients come to me, honestly, it's from my community. It's from Instagram. My clients have been referred from friends, former clients. One was my friend. When I went to college with. So it's really my community. So for me, community is a huge thing. And that's what I try to create in my platform as well. Like I really want people to see who I am. And like how I talk on my IG stories is how I will talk to you in person. Like I'm not going to be any different. Like I'll still stutter here and there or mispronounce something, or like giggle about something. So that's kind of how I meet my clients. And I also am trying to be more on podcasts as well, and like communicating and connecting with other people who share their passion in their career, because all of you are sharing your passion. Like doing this work is you putting yourself and following your passion. So I think it's so beautiful to experience that and see others doing the same. And the coaching container is 3 months, like I mentioned, that's like 12 weeks, an hour. And we really work on really identifying that next career move for that individual with their current skills. People sometimes feel like, oh, do I need a new skill? Do I need to go back to, no, it's like you have skills. We just need to really be able to articulate them, be able to communicate them to an employer, and like really figuring out what the next move is for you.
Got it. Now, do you have options to expand if someone says, I need more time? Do you help people get in touch with maybe specific, hey, this is something that you could use some help on? I don't know that as well, but I have somebody that I can put you in touch with. Do you have a bigger network like that?
Usually, so the expansion of the 3 months, clients always have the option to resign. So that's one option. And then let's say I haven't had a situation where a client comes to me and they're like, I need help with this and I don't know how to help them there. Usually it's more of career exploration, really identifying what that career they want to do. So based on their need, I'll be like, okay, let's try out a career fair. Are there any in your area? Do you have anyone in your network you can connect with and do informational interviews? One of my former clients, she already know what she wanted to do. It was just more taking action on it and like doing it. And the fears and the doubt was what was preventing her. So that coaching went a little different. So coaching is very tailored based on my client's need. And we go from there. I have had people who are like, oh, I'm curious to know what someone in this job does. I'm like, oh, I know someone I can connect you with. So I use my community and my resources as like, and then I'm like, hey, like, are you open to connecting for like 15, 20 minutes with someone to do informational interviews? So I think informational interviews are a great start, especially if you're curious about a specific career, because you ask the person what they do day to day.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a total sense there. And it's great that to know that no one's tied down to only 3 months. I have 3 months with her, and if it doesn't work, well, then I'm sort of screwed. No, you can keep on going.
Yeah.
And some people do need the extra help. They need to really dig deep and figure out, okay, what do I want to do? How much do I want to make? What the expectations are? Is it around here? Do I have to go somewhere else to get that? And how does different cultures in different states, and what does that whole thing look like? So that's really good.
Yeah.
Have you seen? Because most of your clients are in the Bay Area or California, correct?
Yeah, California. I have one in Utah, but most of them are like in California area.
Gotcha. Have any of them told you about, say, you know what, I need to leave California because I want to do this, but I can't afford, even basically living over here, and maybe if I go somewhere else, that will happen. Have you seen that?
No, I actually haven't. I feel like our conversation about life does come in though. Like, well, actually, one of my current clients, the one's in Utah, she has thought about moving to California. But she's like, it's more like SoCal area. But she's like, oh, the living, the pay. And I'm like, okay, tell me why you want to live in California and why in Utah? Like, putting the money aside, like, what are your values? Where are you in this moment of your life? What do you enjoy? And that's kind of like the work we're doing right now, exploration. But most of the ones that I have in California, they like California. A lot of my clients from California, they like it. And they're like making decisions. If I do want to live here, realistically, I'm gonna, pay this average of rent, or, do I want to be a homeowner? And then in what area of California? Because that plays another role as well. So I think we're just really asking people the questions and help them make their own decisions. And like, what do you want in your life? Like, I know I love living in warm weathers, and I could go maybe to a different place. I like where I live in the Bay Area, San Jose area. I like it right now. Who knows? Maybe in the future I might move. I know I want to live next to the ocean one day. San Francisco's too cold for me, so not here, So just like really looking at your life and how your life is going to impact the way you make your career decisions.
Wow. Yeah. If there was one sentence that if you could sum it up into one sentence that people might be thinking about in terms of, should I even go for a career coach? What's like the one question that you want people to ask themselves before deciding, do I want to change things?
I would say one question they can ask themselves is like, what I've been trying to do or doing or not doing, been working up to this point. Because I've had clients who are like, I tried for 6 months on my own and I got nowhere. So that's why I'm working with you.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, because I know it could be a little hesitant of like, should I ask for help? Should I not? Like, and there's so many factors that play into like making those decisions. But I feel like if you're in a place where you're like, what I'm doing is not working, I really want the support from someone who knows how to get me from point A to point B. Like, I would definitely encourage, to connect with a career coach, specifically if you have an area specific career you want to go into, a career coach in that area, or if you're in the place where you're like, I have no idea what career path I want to take. I don't know how my current skills transfer to this specific role I might be curious about. Definitely career exploration. Yeah.
Wow. Well, JoJo, this has been a great episode. I learned a lot about that, and you have a lot of information I'm glad is getting out there to people. What's the best way that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way people can connect with me would be Instagram. My name on Instagram is at jojo.mendoza with double Z. So that's the best way through DM. Yes.
Perfect. I'll put the link in there to make it easy for everybody else. And do you have a website? Do you have videos on YouTube? What do you think about the future of where you're going to go with this?
So at this moment, it's just Instagram. I feel like in the future, I do want to create a podcast. I definitely do. I think a podcast is something I've noticed. I love going on my IG stories and talking. So I'm like, okay, maybe YouTube in the future. But I feel like there's definitely ideas. I want to create programs. I know in the future I do want to provide a scholarship for women of color who want to go back to grad school.
Wow.
So there's definitely ideas I have coming. But yeah, at the moment it's just Instagram and one-on-one coaching.
I'm excited to see the future of that, to see in a couple of years, hey, how are things are going? And all these things we're talking about now, I'm sure we'll feel that you'll be able to make them happen.
Yeah, I'm excited.
But thank you for coming on the show. It was a great conversation. And if you are watching, if you enjoyed the episode, please like the episode, so subscribe to the channel and share this episode with your friends and family. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please leave me a comment and share the episode to help get the message out there with JoJo Mendoza. Everybody have a good one. Bye.